Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'll be beginning a series discussing the core beliefs of major religions across the world, seeing if they are logically coherent and comparing them to Islam. The reason I am starting this series is because with the rise of globalism in recent centuries, the question of how do I know which religion is correct is often brought up in conversations. In fact, this question often leads people away from trying to look for an answer altogether. I will not be using modern scientific discoveries and comparing them to any religion, because that is an absurd position to take. Philosophers of science are in consensus that science does not provide absolute truth, but rather an approximation of what we can know about the world around us through our senses. If today I use a certain scientific discovery to prove or disprove a religion, tomorrow, when that scientific discovery is refuted or replaced by another, in what physicist Thomas Kuhn described as a paradigm shift, my claims will no longer matter. Therefore, science is not going to be used very much, if at all, in this series. This comparison will be done on a probabilistic basis. In other words, if the religion contains a contradiction or logical problem at its core, that makes it logically impossible. If it's logically impossible to follow this set of beliefs is delusional, and the chance of it being true becomes extremely low. I will be looking through religions whose texts are intact and who have a significant following in the 21st century. The reason for this is because if the texts are missing or there is barely anyone following it, the question of what the core ideals are becomes a guessing game, and the probability of this religion being true is significantly low. The first major religion which we will be looking at is Buddhism. Buddhism is an Indian religion which according to Buddhists originates from the sayings of a man named Buddha. We can see this man as a prophetic figure who had proclaimed knowledge about the universe and meaning of life. For the purpose of this video, I'll mostly be using the main scripture of the Theravada sect of Buddhism, known as the Pali Canon. It is considered the oldest existent Buddhist canon. Some scholars, such as Richard Gombrich, Anthony Warder, and Jan Wayne Dong, believe that there is no reason to assume that the early schools of Buddhism practiced anything different from what Buddha himself preached. They claim that the early Buddhist texts can possibly contain information which he preached with some minor changes. This is the view of many traditional Buddhists as well. On the other hand, traditional Buddhists also believe that the scripture was solely orally transmitted for the early part of the religion's history. Unlike the oral transmission, which is found in Islamic history, the names, biographies, and trustworthiness of the people who transmitted this information is totally anonymous, and Buddhist scholars do not have dedicated sciences for determining fabricated claims from true claims. Also, unlike Islamic history, Buddhist scripture has a 400-year-long gap before the earliest piece of text about Buddha's life. The Buddhist scripture which is being referred to is known as the Theravadin Pitakas, and they were found in Sri Lanka, where Buddha himself lived in North India. The earliest physical manuscripts of the Quran, in comparison, are dated to the life of the Prophet Muhammad and his companions. Furthermore, according to early Buddhist scholar Lars Fagelin, there were major removals from the Pali Canon during the 5th and 6th centuries, approximately 1,000 years after Buddha's death. The very Sri Lankan text, which we mentioned previously as the earliest surviving scripture, itself states that the Pali Canon had been redacted near the end of the 1st century BCE, according to Fagelin. In truth, these facts are enough to put Buddhism under the category of a religion with missing texts, and therefore not eligible for this series. However, for the sake of being fair to the large number of Buddhists worldwide, we will temporarily assume that the modern Pali Canon and other Buddhist scriptures are all reliably transmitted, and instead focus on the actual content of the religion rather than its textual history. Buddhism's view on the existence of a deity is disputed. In the Vajrayana school of Buddhism, there exists a concept known as Primordial Buddha. Scholar of Buddhism Bruce Allen Wallace claims that this concept is in fact theistic in nature and compares it to Abrahamic religions. An early school of Buddhism, known as the Mahasamgika, saw the Buddhas as holding divine qualities. Yao Zihao, in his book The Buddhist Theory of Self-Cognition, writes, in their view, the Buddha is equipped with the following supernatural qualities: transcendence, lack of defilements, all of his utterances preaching his teaching, expounding all his teaching in a single utterance, all of his saying being true, his physical body being limitless, his power being limitless, the length of his life being limitless, never tiring of enlightening sentient beings and awakening pure faith in them, having no sleep or dreams, no pause in answering a question, and always in meditation. Since it's believed that there is a multiplicity of Buddhas, this school of thought falls under the category of polytheism. The existence of multiple all powerful beings is a contradictory one. That being said, most modern Buddhists reject the belief in God altogether. This arises from the central tenet of Buddhism known as dependent origination. Dependent origination means that one thing requires another for its existence, and therefore attempts to explain away the necessity or possibility of God by claiming that reality can be considered an infinite cycle of events depending on other events, and objects depending on other objects. This is an illogical position, as it leads to the infinite regress fallacy. The fact that this universe exists is proof that there was not an infinite amount of causes. Let me give an example from the philosopher Hamza Tzortzis to make it easier to understand. Imagine there's a sniper who requires an order from his headquarters to open fire. Let's say that the headquarters requires the approval of a higher up to allow the snipers to shoot. Let's say that the higher up requires the approval of another higher up, then another higher up, then another. Let's say that this goes on forever. Will the sniper ever take his shot? The answer is no. This is because an infinite chain of causes cannot be traversed. In other words, the universe does require a primal causer for it to have existed, because an eternal chain of causes that depend on each other cannot lead to an effect. Some Buddhist philosophers were very anti-theistic and even attempted to prove the rationality of Buddhism over theism through arguments that disprove the existence of God. Matthew Capstein describes one of the arguments of medieval Buddhist philosophers against God in the following manner. The changing state, however, of a thing that is caused implies there to be change also in its causal basis, for a changeless cause cannot explain alteration in the result. The Buddhist is trying to say that because the universe is changing, God must be changing as well. Therefore, a changeless God is impossible. This is fallacious because it assumes that God did not predetermine the changes that happen in the universe. He had always known when and how he would change it beforehand. In an ironic twist, the Buddhist who tried to take the quote-unquote rational position against God falls into a trap by admitting a logical fallacy. There are other core tenets of Buddhism as well, such as nirvana, reincarnation, and karma, all of which could also be discussed. However, the core theological issues of Buddhism are enough to prove that it is irrational. Most of my argumentation is focused around explicit doctrines and not the details, as I find that those are what truly matters. See you guys for the next episode, which we will be talking about Hinduism and Sikhism, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.